UFC Fight Night Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot takes place in a couple days. And it's time for me to give my breakdown and prediction for every single fight on this card. We finally have fans in the building. I know that the Apex does actually host fans, but there will be a crowd. I'm guessing it's going to be at least a couple thousand, maybe less. But either way, it's going to feel like a bit of a different environment. I'm looking forward to it. This reminds me of the Merab and Jan fight that they had at some hotel in Vegas last year. So there should be a really good atmosphere, something different. This fight night is a big step up from the last few. Not that big of a step up, to be honest, but there's a lot of interesting talent on this card. A lot of prospects that have bright futures. And without further ado, let's get into it. Of course, the timestamps are in the description. And let's get down to the first fight. Angel Pacheco versus Caolan Loughran. Okay? I'm picking the Irishman. I'm picking Caolan Loughran to win this fight by a TKO. Now, I'm a little bit concerned, and this is why. Caolan, he's only fought once in the UFC, and he's lost via close decision to Taylor Lapillus, who's an undefeated French prospect. And he's only got one L now, but it was a close decision. Angel, on the other hand, is coming off of a loss on the Dana White Contender Series. And I just struggled to pick someone that's lost on the Dana White Contender Series, okay? I know that we hype up all the winners, and sometimes they turn into chicken dinners, and they don't even do that well in the UFC. Sorry to cringe you out with that quote, but my point is some of these motherfuckers lose when they get to the UFC after having a sick Dana White Contender Series performance. This dude's losing on the Dana White Contender Series. So at the end of the day, I'm going to consider the guy that actually made it to the big leagues. How about that? That's young, that is just now tasting defeat and is coming back with a vengeance versus a guy that's a little bit older, doesn't even have more experience, who's a little bit more inconsistent. You know, and Angel, dude, he lost a pretty bad decision. And if you're losing a decision on the Dana White Contender Series, that just goes to show that you're not actually going out there to take it. You know, Dana White always says that I love the Dana White Contender Series even more than the UFC because it's about these guys really showing how much they want it, right? You got one chance to make an impression. This guy's losing by decision. What does that tell you? Now, Caolan, a little bit worried because I think he has potential. He's got a ton of finishes before the UFC, a ton of TKOs. And you look at his build and you can see why. He's got like this very sturdy tank look. He kind of has a Drew Dober-esque physique. I just didn't see him fighting in a way that matches up with his build in his last performance against Taylor Lapillus, who had a big reach advantage. I think like a 5-inch reach advantage over him. And we saw Caolan on the outside trying to play the range game. And he's got these huge legs. And I was thinking, dude, where are the low kicks, bro? Like, where are the low kicks? This guy could make a killing with those. But instead, he's just focusing on like playing the little boxing range game with the guy with a massive reach advantage. And I'm a little bit concerned that he's not going to fight the way he needs to. But Angel, a little bit easier to find, a little bit easier to hit. And I think that Caolan is going to go in with a bit of a better approach. So I will be picking him to win this fight via TKO. I'm going to pick him by a second round TKO. Let's get on to the next one. Andre Petroski versus Jacob Malkoun. I love this fight. I don't know why it's so low on this card. Talk about horrible fight placement. But this is one of the best fights on the night. Stylistically, this is like a poor man's Roman Dolidze versus Alexander Hernandez that was just booked. Two solid grapplers. I hate to be that guy, but Jacob Malkoun, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated fighters in the middleweight division, or should I say most underrated grapplers. I rewatched his fight with Brendan Allen. He beat Brendan Allen. And that fight was what, 2022 on the Yuri Prohaska Glover Teixeira card? I just rewatched that fight today. I don't know how the fuck Brendan Allen got his hand raised. He lost the first round. He definitely lost the second. He looked shocked himself when he got his hand raised. That was a robbery. As far as I'm concerned, this guy's only lost once in the UFC because, of course, you'll look at his record. It says lost to Cody Brundage. If you don't know what happened, Jacob Malkoun smudged Cody Brundage with a little grazing elbow, and Cody Brundage tapped out and totally quit. You know, just wanted out of the fight. He milked it. It was like an Oscar award-winning performance for Cody Brundage that night. even worse than Aljamain Sterling when he fought Petr Yan back in the day. So he's got 2 L's after the Phil Haas loss, but those are not L's. He beat Brendan Allen. Dude, this guy not only beat Brendan Allen, he took him down and like beat his ass a little bit. Like he was beating Brendan Allen's ass. He was taking him down and controlling him. And then you look at his fight that he had with AJ Dobson. We just saw AJ Dobson fight Edmund Shabazian. AJ Dobson, for sure, he can improve, and I understand that. But AJ Dobson looked like AJ Dobson early on. Fast, long, rangy boxer, very quick hands, like kind of hard to get in on the inside of. And the dude has a wrestling background as well. Listen, the thing that worries me about Jacob Malkoun is what we saw in the first round of that fight. The guy is probably the best jitterbug you'll ever see. I mean, you hit Jacob Malkoun with a shot. I mean, the guy goes into a jitterbug frenzy. He has the weirdest, most suspect chin, but he can keep it together. He has very good survivability when he gets hit, but he always gets cracked and wobbled, which is worrisome. But back to the Dobson fight. Dobson took the first round off of him. Second and third round, total domination for Jacob Malkoun. Total domination. And Dobson was stuffing the takedowns early. It's just that Jacob Malkoun, as far as his pace goes and his pressure, and he just wore on him and started beating the fuck out of him with ground and pound. And then, of course, we know he kind of dominated Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Now, the Phil Haas loss. If you guys haven't seen the Phil Haas loss, that may be the most embarrassing fight I've ever seen in my life. If you ever want to see someone shit their pants, what does it look like to shit your pants in an MMA fight? Jacob Malkoun versus Phil Haas. He kind of did shit his pants there. But since then, he's looked great. He's looked great, and he was on his way to dominating Cody Brunson. I'm picking him to beat Andre Petroski. It took me a while to say it, but I am picking Jacob Malkoun to beat Andre Petroski. I know that Petroski has the high-level wrestler aura, and he's called out Bo Nickel, and he's jacked, and you look at Jacob Malkoun, and we call him Mellow Malkoun. I'm going to start calling him Mellow, because he looks like a marshmallow, right? He has a very unassuming physique, kind of just looks like a fat gamer, to be honest. Andre Petroski looks like he's wrestled at an Olympic level, just physique-wise, and he trains with a sick team. He trains with Joe Pyfer, and you imagine the salt levels in that room that are in Philly, too. I mean, these guys are training with a chip on their shoulder. You got to be careful. But, man, Andre Petroski just barely stunk it out over slow man Gerald Meerschaert. Now, I know Gerald Meerschaert's the GOAT. I totally understand that. But come on, man. On the feet, he ain't that good. Now, I understand not blowing through Gerald Meerschaert on the ground. Pause. Okay? But what I mean is, Andre Petroski won that fight because of a couple of knockdowns. And knocking down Gerald Meerschaert it's not that, he's just so slow. He's like a little tortoise out there, man. And Andre Petroski, in my opinion, was losing the grappling exchanges in that fight. And he was actually like kind of losing a lot of the striking exchanges. He wins via a couple of knockdowns. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that Jacob Malkoun is just more dominant on the ground, right? Andre Petroski is coming off of a knockout loss. I'm not looking too deeply into that. We know he just got smoked by Michel Pereira. But he's also going to a decision with Wellington Turman. And it's like a very close decision as well. Like that was a competitive, close fight. Jacob Malkoun, he's the most unassuming dude ever, but he is kind of like dominating dudes on the ground. And he did beat Brendan Allen. And I think that Brendan Allen is better than anyone Gerald Meerschaert's ever fought. And of course, he beat Nick Maximov, and we were all saying, whoa, dude, this guy's sub Nick Maximov. But Nick Maximov was kind of a bum. I'm not going to pretend that he wasn't. So I'm going with Jacob Malkoun. I think that as far as the striking is concerned, for sure, Andre Petroski can crack a little harder, but he's super sloppy on the feet. And Jacob Malkoun, I just think he's a little bit crisper. His survival instincts on the feet are great. Does have a suspect chin. I don't mind Andre Petroski's chances of getting the KO, but I do kind of like the consistency on the feet of Jacob Malkoun. He's really good at biding his time and setting up takedowns, and he's got the perfect weapons to be able to at least handle himself up there. He's got a decent jab. He's got decent kicks. And I just think the pace, the cardio, the pressure, the ground and pound, I think it's going to be a little much for Andre Petroski, who, again, wasn't anything to write home about against Gerald Meerschaert. I know Meerschaert is really good, but he's a different kind of grappler. Meerschaert is like a submission expert, whereas Malkoun is like a dominant wrestler. And he trains with Whitaker too. Not saying that just because you train with someone means you're as good as them, but Whitaker's got good wrestling at least. Definitely when it comes to scrambling and stuffing takedowns, and think of all the good work Whittaker's giving Jacob Malkoun in the gym, all the fits that Malkoun's having because he's having a hard time taking down Whittaker. I'm not buying into the Petroski hype just because he looks, like your typical high-level wrestler. Don't think he's that impressive. His striking is very mid. Malkoun's is kind of mid, but he's more of a force when it comes to the pace and the pressure. I'm picking Malkoun by decision. Let's get on to the next one. Ibo Aslan versus Anton Turkalj. The Pleasure Man is back. I'm going to pick Ibo Aslan to get it done. Now, this is a rematch, which is going to surprise you. And you're probably thinking, if you didn't know it was a rematch, you're probably thinking, well, Anton Turkalj probably got smoked, right? Well, actually, no. Turkalj subbed Ibo Aslan in the first round. It may have been the second round, maybe at the very end of the first round, but essentially, there was a lot of clinching going on, a lot of stuffed takedowns, and Ibo Aslan was getting the better of Anton Turkalj on the feet in the clinch. He was landing good elbows, he was landing good haymakers when they would break off from the clinch, but Anton Turkalj eventually got the better of a grappling exchange and took Ibo Aslan's back and choked him out. But the thing is, man, Ibo's coming off of a great win on the Contender Series where we saw him just smoke some dude, impose his will like a madman, ran at him, blitzed forward with long combinations. And Anton Turkalj, he just got knocked the fuck out by Tyson Pedro. And before that, he kind of got smudged into the canvas against Vitor Petrino, and they went to war. That was a lot of damage that he took in that fight too. And before that, he got totally annihilated by Jailton Almeida. Now, I'm not saying Ibo Aslan is Jailton Almeida. I'm not saying he's Vitor Petrino, and I don't even think he's necessarily as good as Tyson Pedro. I'm just looking at the trajectory. Turkalj's coming off of 3 L's. He's holding on for dear life to his UFC career, and he's fighting a guy that gave him a lot of hard moments, that was kind of beating him up a little bit in the beginning of their fight. And Anton Turkalj doesn't really even have great wrestling. So I think that Ibo Aslan is going in there with a softened up Anton Turkalj. And I think that Ibo Aslan, who's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit quicker, is going to finish and KO Anton Turkalj. And that's that. I'm going to pick the guy that's on a better streak, that's coming in hot versus the guy that's on a cold streak, that's on a slump. So I'm going to rock with Ibo Aslan to win the rematch. Maybe we'll see a legendary trilogy someday. I don't know about that, but I am unfortunately going to have to go against Anton Turkalj in this fight. Let's get on to the next one. Buzukja Joe, Dennis Buzukja. He's had a rough go in the UFC, man. These Ray Longo, Matt Serra boys, Longo Weidman gym, they've been having a rough go. A lot of them have been getting smoked. Every prospect out of that gym has been getting smoked. And he's facing a monster in Connor Matthews. Now, Connor Matthews has not made his UFC debut. This is the prospect that you're going to want to watch tonight, in my opinion. I've watched Connor Matthews fights. He's an amazing finisher. He's so well-rounded. He's got big power in his hands. He's got a great submission game. As soon as you make a mistake in front of this guy, you're basically screwed, at least at the level that Dennis Buzukja is fighting at. I think Connor Matthews is going to get Dennis Buzukja out of there in the first round by a knockout or a choke. I think he may hurt Dennis Buzukja. I think he may just take him down and sub him. But all I know is this, Buzukja Joe, he's just kind of mid. There's just nothing that this guy does that's that great. He just got smoked by Jamall Emmers in the first round, and I did pick Jamall Emmers to beat him because I was saying the long, rangy 1-2s of Emmers is going to be an issue for him, and little do we know, he gets caught by the long, rangy right, and he gets put away in the first like 10 seconds, basically. Sean Woodson. I know Sean Woodson's a tough out. I know the guy is a very awkward build. But Buzukja Joe just had absolutely nothing for Sean Woodson. He kind of looked like he was a guy that had just trained on the pads alone for a year, and that was it leading up into that fight. Of course, maybe the grappling is better than we're led to believe right now because you just can't take down Sean Woodson for whatever reason. And then Jamall Emmers finished the fight so quickly, we didn't really get to see it. But I don't think that Buzukja is going to out-grapple Connor Matthews, who's got phenomenal grappling, very dangerous submission game. And I think it's going to be a stand-up battle early on. And I have to go with the guy that's got the reach advantage, that's got the big power advantage. Look up Connor Matthews on YouTube and you'll see all the finishes that I'm talking about. He's very sick. He's poised. He's not a wild man. He's like a very poised fighter. I'm going to pick him to win this fight. I don't think Buzukja is that great. Let's get on to the next one. On to the next one, Herbert Burns versus Julio Arce. I'm definitely going to go with Julio Arce in this one, all right? Now, Herbert Burns, You think of the Burns name, you think great grappling, you think good jiu-jitsu. Man, Burns is not only 36, this is Gilbert Burns' brother, of course. He's 36 years old, he's been out of the cage for 2 years, and his last 2 fights, he's gotten smoked on the ground. He's gotten smoked from the crucifix position, and then in his last fight, he's gotten smoked on the ground by exhaustion. Dude literally just quit in his last fight because he was so exhausted, and he got TKO'd, and Gilbert Burns had to carry him out of the cage. So he's got finished via ground and pound in his last 2 fights. He's 36 years old. I don't necessarily know if he's all there or if he's that dedicated to the sport. I mean, where the hell has this guy been? You're 34. You got to at least come back when you're 35. He's waiting until he's almost 37. It's not a good look for him. He's had a couple of decent wins throughout his career, but then again, it's like Julio Arce's also got some decent wins. Arce has beaten Julian Erosa, he's beaten Dan Ige, and I just think Burns is just kind of mid. Like, Arce's a better striker. Arce's faster on the feet. He's got decent grappling. So I'm probably going to go with Julio Arce to win this fight via TKO. Of course, the cardio is going to play a huge role into it. I can't trust a guy that couldn't even hold up for more than 5 minutes in his last fight. On to the next one. Nate the Train versus Jamall Emmers, guys. I'm picking Nate the Train. I'm picking Nate Landwehr. Despite him losing in his last bout, and Jamall Emmers smoking Buzukja Joe in his last bout, I think this is going to be a war of attrition. I think it's going to be a war. I think it's going to be a great fight, great scrap. I could see Jamall Emmers winning the fight early in the first because he's got a slight reach advantage. And not only does he have a decent reach advantage, but he's very fast early on. I just think that Nate the Train is going to be able to hold up. He's added a lot of kicks into his game, like the oblique kick, where he was throwing it a ton against Dan Ige. He was throwing it a lot against Austin Lingo. But we also know that he's got some decent power in his hands, right? I know David Onama doesn't have the best chin, but we saw Nate Landwehr rocking him all over the place. He's got a really good clinch game. And even though he lost to Dan Ige, we saw Nate Landwehr actually kind of mince up Ige and start to get to him and start to break him a little bit in the third round. I'm not saying he was on the verge of breaking Ige as in finishing him or anything like that, but he was wearing on Ige and the tide was starting to turn. And we know how good Ige is. Ige is in his prime. He's a top 10 guy on earth. And Jamall Emmers, I'm not convinced that he's there yet. I'm not convinced. So even though Nate Landwehr is also not necessarily cream of the crop, I'm going to have to pick him in this one because I think he's going to have a slight grappling advantage. I think if this turns into a dogfight, I think that we've seen him prevail in those moments like we saw in the David Onama fight, which was just an absolute war. And I think that he can at least hold up when it comes to the points battle because he's got the kicks now. He's got the oblique kicks. I think in the clinch, he's going to be better there too. And I kind of just want him to win as well. Okay? So I'm going to be picking Nate Landwehr. I trust that he gets it done. Jamall Emmers is pretty good, but in fights where things are close, I don't see him go after it as much as Nate Landwehr would. And I kind of trust Nate Landwehr to have a little bit more hustle if things are close in this one. So I will be picking Nate Landwehr. I'll pick him by decision. On to the next one, Chidi Njokuani versus Rhys McKee. Unfortunately for Rhys McKee, he's 0-3 in the UFC, and I think Chidi Njokuani is going to smoke him in this fight. All right? Rhys McKee just lost to Angulusa. He lost to Alex Morano. He lost to Khamzat Chimaev. So this guy got cut after losing to Chimaev, which was, I think, one of Chimaev's first fights. And Chimaev smoked him. We remember that. That was on Fight Island. Then he loses to Alex Morano, which is not a good look for a prospect. I know Alex Morano is not a slouch. He's not a pushover. But you can't be that great if you're losing to Alex Morano. And then he loses to Angulusa. And I rewatched that fight today. And there's just no urgency. There's no dangerous element. This guy has some okay uppercuts. He has a long reach, long legs, and he's got like an ability to kick at range pretty well, but there's no speed or sting on his shots. I don't think he's that dangerous. And I just see Chidi Njokuani, although he did gas out and break and get finished in the first round of his last fight against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, Chidi was fighting a guy in Mikhail Oleksiejczuk that was like constantly pushing forward, that has power in his hands, that has a good chin, that's very dangerous and can impose his will. He's up against someone that's going to kind of float around on the outside with him and go tit for tat. And I think that Chidi Njokuani is just the better tit for tat guy. I think he's faster. I think he's stronger. I think he hits harder. So I'm going to pick Chidi Njokuani to KO Rhys McKee. I'm going to go with a brutal KO. Chidi looked good in his last fight, man. He looked real good in his last fight, even though he still lost. And he's had a couple of rough goes. Like, I know he's been finished by Gregory Rodriguez. I know he's been beat by Albert Duraev, but I still just watch him fight. And via the eye test, I think he can smoke Rhys McKee, who's like the much slower, weaker striker of the two. And again, he's not been able to get a single win at the UFC level. So I'm going to pick Chidi Njokuani, first round TKO. On to the next one, Guram Kutateladze at home versus Bill Algeo. I'm going to have to go with Guram Kutateladze at home to get served up and smoked by Bill Algeo. Now, I understand that this guy's actual name is Kyle Nelson, but I also understand that Bill Algeo is just way better, and Bill Algeo can do everything that Kyle Nelson can do, but he can do it a whole lot better. All right, we're talking about a guy that beat Joe Anderson Brito. We're talking about a guy that just got past Alexander Hernandez when Alexander Hernandez was on thin ice for the 5th time. We're talking about a guy that smoked TJ Brown by submission. All right, we're talking about the guy that made Herbert Burns tap and quit in that fight that I talked about earlier today versus Kyle Nelson, Mr. Pitty Pat Patty Wap. I'm sorry, man. I'm going with Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo is a savage. He's a finisher. He's a dog. He's going after it. He's moving forward like a warrior. He's letting his hands go. He's high output. He's got nasty kicks. He's got good boxing. What's Kyle Nelson have? I'm sorry, man. Bill Algeo is smoking you. This guy's beating Joe Anderson Brito. Joe Anderson Brito is the boogeyman for hardcore fans in the featherweight division. This is the hardcore fans boogeyman that everyone's calling out and saying, yeah, the UFC needs to get him a ranked opponent. This is a total injustice, man. I'm picking Bill Algeo to smoke this dude, okay? Easy pick. I'm going to go with Bill Algeo, and I'm going to say 2nd round TKO, maybe 3rd round. This could literally just be Guram and Elvis Brenner part 2. All right, so we got Guram and Elvis Brenner at home, guys. It's going to be the same outcome. Let's get on to the next one. Nursulton Ruziboev versus Sedriques Dumas. Now, I'm sure you guys know who I'm picking in this fight. I don't even have to say it. I'm obviously going with Sedriques Dumas. No, I'm joking. I'm picking Nursulton Ruziboev because how could you not? Sedriques Dumas has been so underwhelming. I mean, the guy got smoked by Josh Fremd, dropped, submitted. All right, Josh Fremd was looking like Roman Kopylov in front of him, basically. And then, of course, we also saw him have a stinky decision against Cody Brunson. And I know DC was talking about him like he was George St. Pierre-esque. He looked horrible in that fight. And then he has a bit of a lackluster decision over Abu Azaitar. Not necessarily what I want when you're going in there to fight a guy that's got like a 99% finish rate. There is one weird thing about Nursulton that I've noticed. Dude looks like he's put on 30 pounds of muscle throughout the past couple of years. If you look at his older fights, he looks like a lightweight. He looks like a skinny lightweight. Now he's fighting at middleweight and he's smoking Bruno Ferreira with one punch. He's way bigger. So there is something strange going on as far as that's concerned. And I don't think it's just the lighting that some of these other promotions have or like the shitty quality camera. But yeah, he's just gotten a lot bigger. He's bulked up. He's got nasty power in his hands. And he's also got a really good ability to submit people and TKO people on the ground. So Sedriques Dumas, who's been showing us some good grappling, I don't think he's getting the better of Nursulton, who doesn't have the best takedown defense. Like, I think that we could see Sedriques Dumas taking down Nursulton and controlling him for a bit, but I think it's only a matter of time before he gets reversed, submitted, or TKO'd. And I can even see Nursulton just knocking down Sedriques early and then submitting him afterwards. Because as soon as you're in a bad position on the ground with Nursulton, most people don't make it out of that position, especially at the level that Sedriques is operating at. So I will go with Nursulton by a first-round submission. On to the next one. Bruno Silva versus Chris Weidman. I'm going with the All-American. I'm joking. Man, Chris Weidman's about to get fucking smoked. Let's not make any mistake about this. In order for Chris Weidman to win this fight, and dude, Bruno Silva just was able to take down Patchy the Pirate himself. Because I was I kind of forgot that he'd even fought Patchy the Pirate. I forgot that he fought Shara Magomedov, Shara the Bullet. But he did. And I remember he had a lot of good grappling moments. And he has decent grappling. But sometimes this guy just fights like a damn fool. But I don't think it'll matter. I don't think it'll matter because Chris Weidman's toast. He's done. Not only is his leg severely compromised ever since the injury that he had against Uriah Hall, but I mean, you look at his last performance against Brad Tavares, it was an embarrassment. And I'm not saying that Chris Weidman should like hang his head low or anything. I'm just saying, dude, you shouldn't even be competing in the sport anymore. You got smoked. Brad Tavares is the takedown defense guy. That's basically the one thing he's got going for him. And you got Brad Tavares out here basically recreating what Ian Gary did to Neil Magny. Chris Weidman was hopping around on one leg, and he was landing a couple of decent shots on the feet every now and then, but wasn't able to get the takedown. And I think that if Weidman just dives for the legs consistently, he could win this fight. But people always say that about Weidman's fights. People are always saying, if he sticks to the wrestling, I think he could pull this off. But 70% of his game plan is going to be to strike. So I'm going to pick Bruno Silva to smoke Chris Weidman. I think he's going to knock him the fuck out, honestly. And I know Bruno Silva's chin ain't that great, but he didn't get finished by Shara the Bullet, and he did take some pretty flush head kicks and some pretty flush shots upstairs. He didn't get finished by Pereira, but then he got, knocked down and finished by Gerald Meerschaert. And of course, we know he got knocked down by Brendan Allen, but he was fighting like an idiot in that Brendan Allen fight. And the difference between Brendan Allen and Chris Weidman, because Bruno Silva was just closing his eyes and hoping and praying he was going to land, putting his head down against Brendan Allen. Of course, he got caught. I don't think Chris Weidman has the ability to make him pay. Not at this point. All right? Weidman's hobbling and cobbling around on his cobblestone knees. It's just the truth. You can't pick him to win this fight. This is a pipeline dream for Weidman at this point, to win a fight in the UFC against Bruno Silva. Maybe against Sedriques Dumas, but not against Bruno Silva. Let's get on to the next one. Vicente Luque, Joaquin Buckley. I'm going to pick Vicente Plotty-Man Luque to win this fight by a TKO. Now, although Joaquin Buckley is coming off of an okay win over Alex Morono, he only looked good in the third round, and I was scratching my head while watching the majority of that fight because I was saying, one of the things that holds Joaquin Buckley back, he kind of reminds me of Guram Kutuledzhi in the sense where he tries to be something that he's just never going to be that good at, which is like this karate blitz style float around the outside, throwing a bunch of fancy schmancy spinning wheel kicks and like crashing in like Robert Whittaker. Like, bro, Joaquin Buckley, he's not got finesse to his striking. He's not Wonderboy. He's not Whittaker with the karate blitz. He doesn't have... It's just like, there's so many wasted movements from Joaquin Buckley. And he's out here playing a little outside foot battle with Alex Morono, like throwing spinning wheel kicks and shit like that. And then in the third round, he just gets in his face and starts letting his hands go, starts boxing in the pocket, and he smokes Alex Morono in the third round. And he beats the shit out of him, and he almost finishes him. I think that if Joaquin Buckley kind of just stays true to that, I think he can do all right in this fight. But I think he's going to get caught doing some stupid shit, right? Because Joaquin Buckley's way to win a fight is like a blast double leg, or it's just, I don't even know, dude. I know he finished Andre Fialho, but who hasn't at this point? And Alex Morono is an old, fat, flabby guy at this point that it's up until the third round where we see Joaquin Buckley actually kind of run away with it. So you look at Vicente Luque, he's just on a totally other level than any of the guys Joaquin Buckley's beating. And Joaquin Buckley is not only losing to everyone that's close to the Vicente level as well, but he's losing to middleweights that are at Vicente's level. Like he's losing to, what's his name? Chris Curtis smoked him, just knocked his ass out with nice counter striking in the pocket. And then of course you saw Nasruddin Imavov beat him. Back in the day we saw Kevin Holland beat him. Vicente Luque is better than Kevin Holland. Vicente Luque is more proven than Nasruddin Imavov. Vicente Luque is more proven than Chris Curtis. This is a welterweight at the end of the day, and Joaquin Buckley, I know this is his more natural weight class, but if you're not getting past the 10, 12 guy in the middleweight division, it's going to be hard to get past the really well-rounded, super durable, heavy-handed, old, reliable Vicente Luque, who is like kind of the opposite of Joaquin Buckley as far as the wasted movements go. Vicente may be plotty, he may be a little bit slow, but he's got a long reach, he's got a hard noggin, he's got a submission game, he's got good takedown defense. And I don't think Joaquin Buckley's going to do the Bilal Muhammad on him. I don't think he's going to be able to run through him with the wrestling. He's going to have to finish Vicente Luque to win this fight. I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he's got the shot selection. And I think that Vicente Luque, who again is going to be lighting Joaquin up with low kicks, who's going to be marching him down right there to counter him and make him pay when he misses, who's going to be greeting Joaquin when he's coming in with a karate blitz or whatever he was trying to do, I think Vicente's got heavy enough hands to hurt him and put him away. Because Joaquin Buckley's been finished. He doesn't have the best chin. I think he's going to get sat down in this fight. I think he's going to get TKO'd or at least beat by decision. Again, just a bit of a skill gap here. Buckley's not proven himself against anyone that's ever been close to Vicente's level. He's just lost to those guys. So, and he's not really made it that particularly close either. Yeah, I think I would have needed to see him smoke Morano for 3 rounds straight, or at least just finish him in the first in order for me to consider him a little bit more. Let's get on to the next one. Bad to the bone. Nano, bad to the bone. UFC flyweight contender of the world, Erin Blanchfield. She's a marauder. Erin Blanchfield is a tough cookie. That Manon Fiorot girl is just a marauder. Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot. It's finally here. I think both of them are kind of overrated. I'm not going to lie. I think Erin Blanchfield is overrated as far as her dominance is concerned. She's got a whole fan base. Now, in Blanchfield we trust. In Blanchfield we trust. Like, relax, dude. Fucking relax. Listen, Erin Blanchfield is good, but she had the worst fight ever with Taila Santos. And in my opinion, that was a fraud check in the sense that Erin Blanchfield is not a big flyweight. I think that perhaps Manon Fiorot's going to be able to muscle her around because Manon Fiorot's actually in shape, super shredded, lean. And Erin Blanchfield kind of looked like a small fry out there in front of Taila Santos. I'm not going to lie. And also, I know Taila Santos is good. She's a tough out. She's got a well-rounded game. But, you know, why do we think she's so good? What, she went to a decision with Valentina Shevchenko? Valentina Shevchenko is overrated. Let me just be honest about that. Now, Manon Fiorot, I think she's overrated too. I'm watching her fight Rose Namajunas. Rose Namajunas broke her hand, and I know that that's natural in fights, and it was still a good win for Manon Fiorot. She's still good, and that's why I'm going to pick her to win this fight. But after a couple of strikes, she's like, you know who she reminds me of? She reminds me of Kamaru Usman in the sense where Usman back in the day would throw a nice 1-2, a nice clean 1-2, and then after it, he would get wild and sloppy. It's like he'd have the jab and he'd have the right hand, but after that, it wouldn't really have a plan, and he would just close his eyes and start swinging, and that was like a young Kamaru Usman, maybe not the champion version. And I'm not saying Usman is on the same level as Manon Fiorot. He's way better than that. But Manon Fiorot is kind of like that. When I'm watching her fight with Rose Namajunas and I'm seeing them clash in close quarters, Manon Fiorot looks like she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. So good thing she's fighting Erin Blanchfield, who's also not really that great as a striker. The question is, can Erin Blanchfield take down Manon Fiorot? Maybe. I guess she could, but at the end of the day, Manon Fiorot was able to stuff 6 takedowns from Rose Namajunas. And I know that Rose Namajunas is not necessarily seen as the wrestler like Erin Blanchfield is, but Rose Namajunas is probably a better grappler than Erin Blanchfield is. All right? It's like there are levels to this game at the end of the day, and I think that Rose Namajunas could probably out-grapple Erin Blanchfield, and she could not take down Manon Fiorot. I know that there are some Cyril Gane vibes as far as Manon Fiorot is concerned when it comes to the grappling. Like, we may just think she has none of it because she's from France and Paris and all that. But at the end of the day, I think that it's going to hold up. And I think she's way bigger and stronger than Erin Blanchfield. And I think that she's just going to keep this thing at range. She's going to make it boring. She's going to be kicking a lot. And I think that she's going to do a good job at stuffing the takedowns. And I don't think that Blanchfield is going to be able to stink it up against the fence like she did to Taila Santos, who is much older than Manon Fiorot and not in her prime. So I'm going to go with Manon Fiorot by decision to get this one done. I hope that there's a finish. Honestly, that's the only thing I'm hoping for. I hope that there's just a finish early on in this fight. But I'm going to go with Fiorot. A lot of people are going to pick Blanchfield because she has the more safe approach. But I just think she's going to be a little bit small out there compared to Manon. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time.